Well, regarding your companion, the next generation companion, I was reading it some years ago, and what struck me as both fascinating and also scary is that many times the final script of of an episode of a movie is so different from the early drafts, and I go like, wow! Imagine if those changes weren't made, we wouldn't have this fantastic movie or episode. Right now, I'm thinking of First Contact, the movie.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
What is time so critical as to what the end product will be? Is always the more time the better for a script to be finalized?
Well, I think in the TV season, yes, because they get into a time crunch. And there are a lot of shows that they think, if we just had more time, we could have made it better. And a lot of times they were shows that there was a lot of expectation about. The Return of Kess was one show that they were really excited to do and were really disappointed the way it came out. I know Michael Piller has never been happy with, well, he's been passed away for 10 years, but Michael had never been happy with the way Unification turned out, the two-parter that was like at the time that was like the biggest, the biggest Next Generation show ever because it was finally the highest profile original series person, to be in an episode. Um, and that was one of the big things back in the day was like when will the original series of Next Gen because that's all there was, you know. When will Next Generation finally cross paths with the original series? And and Dee had been in McCoy had been in that one cameo in the pilot, but after that there'd been no. And gradually the comfort zone came down of yes, Next Generation has enough security in its own skin that now we can embrace this, and that was the huge headline. And in fact, that was what, the 25th, yeah, 25th anniversary. That was an event. That was a 25th anniversary event. That was a bookend with Star Trek Six.
Mhm.
Was that Nimoy was going to do that two-parter, and then of course next year Jimmy Doohan played Scotty on Relics, and then the first Next Gen movie was Shatner and Kirk. So there was kind of
Mhm.
a thing there, but um, yeah, time. That was your question. So a lot of time, but then there's been times when speaking of generations, they worked on that for a year and a half, and they got down to the end and weren't happy with the way the whole top of the mountain shooting Kirk in the back thing went. And by that time, it wasn't. It was about they had a. By that time, they were shoehorned in. They had 3 months to fix it. They couldn't do a whole. They couldn't go build new sets. They basically had to go out back out the mountain and just come up with a new plot. And what could they do in a month or two? So that was a time when time did get them in the end, but at the same time, they'd had a year and a half to develop this script and all these hoops and boxes they had to jump through. So yeah, but that's the nature of TV. That's also why it's kind of like everything else. You look back at something in your life or in history and you go, "Oh my God, how did we ever get around in horse and buggy days? Or how did we ever get by without electricity? Or how did we ever get by without cell phones?" And now the writers all look and go, "My God, how did we do 26 shows a year?" Because now a long full network season is 20 or 22 shows, and the BBC model and the premium shows are 10 or 12 a year even. And you hear them talk, oh my God, because if you look at it, if you took 26 shows a year in all those years of Next Gen and Voyager and DS9 and even Enterprise, there were probably four real clinkers, four real four real shitty shows. If you took four less shows out, you know, our memories would be even better of all the series.
Mhm.
So yeah, definitely time. I mean, I think of Next Generation the most because that's the one I spent the most time with wading through. But they're on all the series. But I remember Aquiel was another show that they were just like, oh my God, they wanted that to be so cool for Geordi, for LeVar to finally have a find a girl, and then they just thought the show was so clunky at the end and the big brown bad early CGI thing at the end, and they were just like, ugh. They were gonna have Geordi married to Aquiel in the future alternate in All Good Things, Instead of Leah Brahms, they were going to have Jordy married to Aquiel on the first idea. And then 5 minutes later, they were like, wait, do we really want to have him married to Aquiel? So they just had it be, since it was spoken anyway, it wasn't intended to be shown. So it wound up being Leah Brahms, which I think was a cooler idea anyway. But so, yeah. Yeah. And then when you talk about First Contact, I mean, I think they made the right decision on First Contact to go the way they did.
Right.
Yeah.
I was thinking that particular movie, and I was like, "Whoa! If they had done what they originally thought of doing, it wouldn't be so great a movie."
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
that's hindsight. Yeah. I mean, Dimitri, what were the choices in your life when you were 18? What if you had
ah,
done something, it's like we all can look back and go, and that's a creative process. It's a little bit like the same thing. It's cool. I mean, that's why I enjoy that, because it is a what. And sometimes if it doesn't turn out to be First Contact, sometimes it turns out to be Insurrection. And you go back at the what if, and when they told Michael, no, don't do Romulans, Romulans are boring, that totally changed the nature of what he wanted to do.
right.
And Insurrection would have been a totally different, because then he had to spend half the movie filling you in on the Baku and the Sonah and coming up with the whole thing, whereas Romulans would have just been Romulans, and you could have just jumped in, bang, and gone.
You're right.
You know? Oh gosh, Cannon helped me. Oh no, look, it wasn't a rock around my neck. It saved time. Gee,
You're
you know.
absolutely right. Well, I was thinking about your book, the most recent book, Stellar Cartography.
Mm,
Well, in that book, what I enjoyed the most is that we get a much clearer picture of the Dominion War. And I imagine it must have been a
thank
huge lot of work for you. How did you manage to put all the data together, all the information, and give us this detailed and a picture that makes sense?
well, speaking of having time to do something, on one hand, and first off, thank you for saying that, and thank you for did you see what I had written, or was that just your actual reaction to seeing them once you got
It
into
was
it?
my actual reaction when I got the whole package. I knew you've done work on the Dominion War, and I ran through the page to see exactly what you did.
Okay, so you did set up a little bit for it. Okay, well, no, thank you for saying that, because Allie, uh, um, well, all our artists did a great job.
Hmm.
There were three artists, and Jeff Mandel did the big, I call it the kitchen sink or the National Geographic map at the end. And of course, Jeff Mandel did the Star Maps book in 2002, which was a great breakthrough, and looked around, saw what fans had been doing based on, once Mike Okuda in the Price back in Next Gen set up the quadrant system.
Hmm.
I mean, there had been the fan versions, and some of them I'd worked on, because I'd always been fascinated by that. Because Star Trek they throw in real stars, and then there's all the means of fictitious stars, and the ones that sound like they ought to be real, but they're not. Um, so, people, and that was one of my favorite things to do when I was first a fan, was make sense of that. Because once you take the real stars and you know where they are, now you start fitting the stories to them, and now the fictitious ones have to fit in a certain way, or there's a lot of leeway on fictitious stars, and then where do you put the Klingons and Romulans? Because that determines a lot of stuff, and then the Cardassians, and then by the time of Next Gen, when Mike came up with the quadrant system and said basically, okay, here's the Klingons, Romulans, Cardassians, and the Borg are going to be way over here. Well, in the Delta Quadrant, that's why they're so far away. Then you're really off and running. And fans had been kind of settling. There was so much being cranked out when we had one and then two shows on. Um, so he took that when he got the idea to do this and did the book and did a huge job. There's even stuff that's not even the book, as I found out later. But what's amazing about that was kind of the end of when Pocket was doing nonfiction. So they didn't keep it in print. So a lot of people never got to see that. I think of it as, I've got two copies here, but I remember how a lot of people never got to see it, or it was totally brand new news to them for all our new fans since then. The other thing was, even if you had a copy, you had the biggest thing you got were those foldouts at the end, because it was restricted by the format of a book. And how many fans were like pulling their hair out, wishing they could, you're flipping back and forth between pages, trying to get a sense of how things go. And the locator maps are tiny, and I've seen online after I got into this where people have scanned those and pieced them together digitally, just they're crying out to have a format they can use. So the cool thing about this maps, and it wasn't my idea, um, uh, uh, CBS got together with Amazon and their 47 North publishing, came together and had the idea and approached me. And of course, that was one of my things. I'd worked on the book with Jeff in 2002 about one of the people had um, this whole thing about them being posters and being big enough to get into it. It's kind of like having blueprints of ships versus little bitty, diagrams. So there's some things that your computer cannot do for you, and this was one of them. So that was very cool. And some of the ideas and topics we had didn't need a lot of, on the map part of it, didn't need a lot of guidance. It needed updating. I mean, I knew we had to physically update for the last 2 or 3 years of Enterprise, and we had to put the JJ Prime in, you know. But there were a lot of unanswered things from the old days, and one of the things was the Dominion War, and how even when Jeff did his book, he just put the guys, Mike and Doug and the art department's star maps they used on set, which looked really pretty. And I remember thinking, okay, I want to use that as canon, but they can't be used as canon because they don't make sense. There are stars on there that are like way, 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 way off.
Mm.
There's nowhere near the the Cardassian border with Bajor. So aside from like not using, but Jeff had just put them in as kind of like here's Dominion War. Well, they still don't make sense, but here's the actual map, so you can actually see them in
Right.
good detail. So yeah, so one of the things that bugged me, there were two or three things. One was, why were they always saying Earth and Vulcan and the Federation homeworlds were in danger when this was all happening over here story-wise? And um, when you put all that on the grid that now existed, that we had worked out, it was way over here, and the Dominion War all seemed to be over here where DS9 was set. And when it comes across that one of the biggest battle of the war right off the bat is that one that they all come limping home from at the beginning of the sixth season when the war first starts, and they talk about the Battle of Tyra 4, and we're getting reports and they're like, oh my God, we were decimated at Tyra 4. Well, we never saw it, and we never heard from that again or where it was. So basically, two or three things happened. And yes, I had time because it's been 10 years since those shows aired. And in that time since, just playing around with it in my own mind's eye, you'd see, and when the book came out, it's like, well, here's the Federation. It started looking like Europe, Africa, and North and South America to me, with the
Mm.
Atlantic in between.
Mhm.
And it was almost, I was going back to World War II kind of themes and thinking about if it was reversed, or more like the Pacific and Japan and North and South America. And here's Japan attacking Hawaii and down toward Australia, and actually they tried to invade Alaska and the Aleutian Islands and come up that way. So it's kind of like, here's the Japanese on a multi-front war and being stymied. And of course, most of the fighting was in the central part, but there were some thrusts here and there. So just, space is three-dimensional, I know, but looking at a two-dimensional map, basically I thought, well, maybe. Oh, and the other part of the thing was Beta Z was occupied, right, in the war, and the not the Bolians, the the other B guys. Good grief, I've gone blank. Um, that sniffed, that breathed,
The
the
brain.
no, not the.
You mean?
I've
Mm.
just gone blank, and your fans are screaming. I can look it up, but not the Bolians, not the Beta Zeds, not BE.
B. They start with B, right?
Yeah, but Wesley had one of them was his friend that was in the cadet class in coming of age.
Was it? Was it
Yeah,
him
those guys.
actually?
What?
No, he was. I can't remember the name of
Yes.
the guys.
Anyway, those guys were occupied. and their planet on the grid is way over by the homeworlds.
Mm.
So basically, I came up with that whole thing of Tyra 4 was kind of like, if it was the Atlantic, Tyra 4 was like Iceland. Or if it was the Pacific, Tyra 4 was kind of like um, Anchorage, Alaska. Okay, it's like they got halfway across because there's kind of a gap. If you look, the Cardassian Bajoran area, and there's kind of a big gap before you get back over on the Alpha Beta divider. And I just kind of thought of that as a kind of a big ocean with nothing really, no real big Federation worlds or neutrals in there.
Mhm.
It's also a little bit like in the Iraq War, the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, where where Saddam Hussein had all of his armies down on the border with Iraq and kept thinking there would be a big land war there, but there was nothing between there and Baghdad. And when the Allies basically bombed and bombed and bombed and bombed and then just went around the line and broke through, there was nothing between them and Baghdad, and they could have made, they call it Baghdad Alley. They could have just made a straight shot right for it, you know. It's kind of like Hitler wished he'd had a straight shot right from Moscow when he invaded Russia. So it's kind of like that big open. So that's the way I looked at it. It's like if they can break through this outer line, they'd have a straight shot right to Earth and Vulcan and all the homeworlds, the Federation, Risa and all that. So those were all kind of my mom, but that was over 10 years of playing with it in my head. I had it all up here. I just never had a forum or anything. And I would say if you go back and look at my column in Star Trek Magazine or some of the things even I've said online, so those were just 3 or 4 threads. So when I got this chance, I went, okay, here we go. See if this makes sense, guys. And I even found somebody online who was doing a Dominion War, kind of a fun Facebook page, um, as if you were a cadet at Starfleet Academy and you're getting the headlines from the Dominion War day by day. And he made up 3/4 of it, but he had done a lot of thinking about it. So I kind of even bounced some things off him, and I thanked him, uh, Thomas Bass. But um, but yeah, so that's where the threads came from. So a lot of the rest of the maps were uh, uh, Ian and Ali Reese and Jeff's maps. The artists did incredible jobs. I mean, on the time side, we had like 3 months and we wound up with 5 to get all that done. And there was a lot of content control because that's one thing I know that we've got to get mistakes are going to be made. There's going to be things that just get through the net, but we've got to do as good as we can because we're tackling so much density, and the fanboys and girls will be out there not just combing over it to be anal, but people will want to be using that. The book guy, the author, Kevin and Dayton and David Mack and Keith, all of them. We we got Starbase 47 in from the Vanguard novels in just as because they had specifically located it down low between the Klingons and Tholians, and so we put a little nod into them. Even though somebody said later on, well, that was supposed to be secret. So, okay, shut up. Um, so each map is a different story as to how much was involved in the map and how much was involved in like my end of because all the maps the artists did, but I was content director on all of them,
Mhm.
you know. So we went back and forth. What was crazy was originally I was hired just to write the book, the guidebook, and they got into it and realized, oh, we need editorial control over the maps too, and it needs to mesh up.
Of course.
So I was like, what I was paid for it was like 7/8 for the book and 1/8 for the maps, but the actual time I spent was more like 7/8 on the maps and 1/8 on the book. But because the book looks very small and skinny, and oh look, I can read this to my kid. It's a child. It's a it's a reader. But it's if you I hope you notice the book is uh is disarmingly, sneakily very dense with facts. It's
Well,
not a tiny, skinny little book,
well,
right?
actually, you have to read each paragraph 2 or 3 times to get it all inside your head, and
Well, you have to. It helps if you know English.
maybe it does.
Yeah. But no, thank you. So yeah, the Dominion War of all of the maps and all the chapters, a lot of those chapters were just things I've carried around in my head or were used on fact files, and kind of I call a lot of connecting dots. Fans go through the world. They know this fact from this show and this fact from that show and this fact from that show. And sometimes when you back off and pull, this is what the beauty that a lot of the fact files writing was. Not that I did a lot of, I did some, But when you pull back and you pull all those things together, and instead of thinking about them as show by show by show, one line in one show, one line, you pull back and you realize, wait a minute, what does this mean? And a lot of the really good podcasters are starting to do this.
Right.
Instead of thinking of show by show, or they get to a show and they go, I want to talk about this one line. Think about this line and now compare, whether it's a person or it's a historical event or it's a cultural concept. Um, but to pull those back and go, now wait a minute. If the homeworlds are always being threatened, but Beta Z was occupied, it's Bo something, not the Bolians. Damn it, I almost had it. Anyway, if they're occupied, what does that mean? And Boleus was under attack, but wasn't taken over. So I have that kind of being the extreme end and they're up in the north part of the homeworlds. So, all those different things make sense. We don't know where Tyra is, so Tyra is going to be my key to making all this make sense. Oh, look, it was the early blow that they struck way over here, and they made a little bit of hay out of it, but they never were able to go further. And the reason the big battles that we know of are where they are, because if they had gotten through those sectors, then it was going to be an easy dash across the empty space over to the Federation world. So they were threatened partly in their own realm, but also if they ever managed to break through these lines, there was no stopping. They had a mad dash across the Alpha Quadrant, bang right to the homeworlds. So yeah,
You spent
so
a
it was just a matter of getting it on paper out for everybody. And I also got the whole thing about the Alpha, the Klingons and Romulans being in the Beta Quadrant. I finally got to say no about that. I mean, yes they are, and all you people quibbling with that, here's why I get off of it. It's canon. Now quit fighting canon. I don't understand that. I love my friends at Memory Alpha. I don't understand why they're stuck on this one thing when it's been that way since, and on screen tons of maps have been on screen since 1990 um, about that. But anyway. So, but thank you for noticing that. And yes, that's my proudest of a whole package that I'm very proud of. That's my proudest part.
well,
And
congrats.
I hope it makes sense with everybody.
It,
I hope I
congrats.
didn't make a major mistake in something and overlook something.
I hope if that's your proudest achievement in the franchise, because I was thinking about your depiction of your favorite character, Dr. McCoy, in Star Trek
Oh,
Experience. And speaking about investing time, I had the impression that you stopped playing the role because you didn't have much time. Is that true, or was the part too intimidating, or I don't know, you were scared that you wouldn't live up to expectations? Now trying to fill in the shoes of your favorite actor, the first Kelly.
yeah. Well, first off, I was trying to say a minute ago about the Dominion War section was that it was my favorite part of that project
Aha.
of
Okay.
stellar cartography.
Okay.
So yeah, um, playing McCoy was very exciting. It was about time, but it was about time in several ways. And one of them, I don't I don't want to say intimidating, but I felt the challenge
Hmm.
really responsibly. I also, speaking of stellar cartography and time, that all happened all together. I had just gotten the word to work on stellar cartography in a hurry when Vic Mignogna asked me to play McCoy on short notice. And not that that's an excuse or anything, but when I got to Kingsland, when I got to the sets and the shoot, I instantly saw, oh my God, this is the bar here is huge, is way high, and I felt bad a little bit that I hadn't prepared more, although I knew what was going on, and I knew I had McCoy in my heart. I hadn't film acted in a long time, and I was just really, I was pretty, I was all set to be excited and do it from the heart. I also had a lot of things I put on myself because I'd done my McCoy impersonation for years at damn it, Jim, you can do that at parties and you can do that goofing around, but does that work when you're actually trying to portray a character? I wanted a character, not a caricature. And I say I wanted to channel Dr. McCoy, not impersonate DeForest Kelley. And which I think Carl Urban does a wonderful job. I think he's my favorite of the cast of the JJ movies doing that. If I have any quibbles, it's the way they wrote the part sometimes, not his acting at all. But and if anything else, I think aside from the fatigue, because we were shooting by day and I was working on the maps at night, um, fatigue and also just realizing how much I really wanted to go back and do some coaching and do some acting work, on top of that. It was just a crazy time because I was doing the maps and cartography, and I was doing that, and we were moving from our house we lived in 15 years. We were about to move to a new place, and my son had gotten married, and we were downsizing and empty nesting, as we say, and I was starting to do more and because of continues, I was starting to do more conventions than ever before. So yeah, so a lot of things happened. I didn't work on my Con of Wrath documentary all last year. Um, Moving just is very exhausting emotionally and physically, especially physically. And being part of Continues, I wanted to be part of Continues, and we were doing all kinds of promotion. We did the Kickstarter or the Kirkstarter, and it was just exciting. And it was so many wonderful people. It was like a whole new realm of friends and people to work with. So it was almost like too many good things. It was like having the best cake in the world and you ate it all at once. I mean, it was that's what 2013 was like. And it got to the point, and then we did Lolani, where I let there's not as much McCoy in Lolani, the second episode, but if you watch, I let a little bit more my old McCoy out, which I think was the right thing to do. I had some advice to do that, but several things. One was I just really wanted to go do more. Um, to be blunt, I wanted to do some more acting coaching, although I always felt like I had McCoy in me, and I hope that always comes through. And bless their hearts, I've had a lot of fans that said, "Ah, you were crap as McCoy," but I've had an awful lot of fans come up and say, and they're usually the ones that write on the internet. But I've also had a lot of people come up and say, "Oh my God, I could totally see DeForest Kelley in your McCoy. Thank you for not making it a caricature. Thank you for not, thank you for the writers who didn't have him doing, I wish he'd do it. There still has not been an I'm a doctor, not a line, and still has not been a he's dead Jim, yet. I think the first episode, the closest we got to a McCoyism was he had a line. He said, Kirk comes in and says, "Well, how is he, Bones?" And McCoy says, "Well, Jim, this is damn peculiar," and that's kind of a McCoyism. But I've had an awful lot of wonderful fans come up and say, thank you, I love your McCoy," or they even say, "I miss your McCoy." And Chuck barely got a chance to do it in the new one after his, in doing the shorts. He's basically come back. So um, everybody keep watching, and I'm still involved. I'm a creative consultant. I told Vic in a year or two I'd like to come back and do some camera work, but I've also got the Con of Wrath. I've got 2 or 3 projects that they're not just projects, they're like invent it and get it off the ground kind of things that I need to be working on. And what's ironic is that I started doing so many conventions because of stellar cartography and because of Continues that it's been great. And I've got to go, to a lot of places I haven't been to before or been to in ages. So, I mean, I'm going to get to go to Destination Star Trek London in October this year, and I hadn't been to London since 2002 for a convention, so that's been great. Um, so yeah, it was just a combination of things, and I kind of took a breath, realized I wanted to do better for McCoy, but more in not so much the deep down part. I was never intimidated about McCoy. Um, it was more about, I guess you could say pressure. It was like being the best I could be to honor it. And I think the core and the guts of it are there. It was more about like channeling. And I already made one tweak, But you know, the continues cast is so great. I really wanted the show to have the best of me, and then the bottom line was I wanted me to have the best of me. And there were so many things that, as much as I love diving in, I wish I could just go back and have a time machine and like give everything
Ah, okay.
a little more extra space. Like 3 years ago, this would have been great. I would have dived in, and because you know, because not on one hand, there's a lot of great talent on the cast on continues, and a lot of, but then there's some that aren't full-time actors, and if you watch Chris's performance has been, you know, everybody loves the fact that he's channeling his dad and has the DNA, but his acting is he's dived in and worked on it just so that the final product, um, you take what you have to begin with and make it even better.
Mm.
That's what I'm getting at. And it was frustrating to me because I did not have the time to make what I had even better, and I wanted to. And the other things that I was working on were also suffering. It was like I was just cramming too much in the pipe. Small pipes,
Small pipes.
small pipes. So so that's what it was. So I want to step back and spread some things out, get a couple of things launched, and do things, you know, a better thing. Which is not to say that one of the things I've been working on is actually is working on a voiceover work, commercial first, and then hopefully some long form narration and some animation down the line. So that's one of the things I'm really, and that takes a lot of time, and that's one of the things that really suffered um, when I was doing. Ironically, like too much of a good thing, Lieutenant. Even love, even work, is not necessarily a good thing. That's from Tribbles, but okay. So
Mm.
yeah, so yes, I do miss it, but I love all the continues people, and I love that I'll always have those 2 episodes, and I want to do more with them. I mean, I got to do a Tellarite very briefly in the flashbacks. I would love to see continues finally go. That's the only Federation member world we have not actually been to anywhere on screen.
Right.
I would love to do, and I'd love to do real characters the way, you know, the way Jeff Combs and Shran finally made a real character out of an Andorian. And the way, you know, at the time, Armin finally made a real character out of a Ferengi, Armin and Max and Aaron. So I would love to do, as crazy as that sounds, I would love to make a real character for the Tellarites in some way and have a real Tellarite story. I think that's way overdue. So,
Would you like to be put on all that makeup, under all that makeup, the Tellarite makeup?
oh, did you? There's a short for Phase 2 where I am. It was
Well,
like a
yeah,
3 hour.
is it
Huh?
pleasant? Is it pleasant to be under all that glue and you think?
Well, you know, like maybe I should talk to you like Michael Dorn or Renee or Armin. If you're
Absolutely.
going to be a regular and you're going to do it every day or, you know, 3 days a week for 6 years or 7 years, that might be something different. But and you'd get to shortcuts. The thing I did, because I have tape, I have pictures of me doing it, but I just, and it's not like I have a pig fetish or anything, guys. Okay, let's just work. But I'm a big, that's why I'm one of the reasons why I'm such a McCoy fan. I'm just a big fan of the underdogs or the people I don't think are getting their due. And when Trek was first out, I wanted to get posters, and I was a fan, and I wanted to do fan things, and everything was Kirk Spock Enterprise, you know, posters and stuff, and you know, on your notebooks and on your lunchbox. And I was like, what? Where's McCoy and Scotty? You know, I love them. And I always loved Journey to Babel, and I always loved the fact that we finally, it's like, okay, well, this ship and these guys, this crew, that's fun, but I want to see this whole world. I remember I remember being a kid and going at final I remember having this light bulb go off. It's like, do you realize this whole Star Trek thing? We're seeing this whole world just from these one guy's ship. Like there's this whole universe out there and we're stuck on this one ship. Like we only have their viewpoint. Can we I'd love to get out and see some other viewpoints from this, you know. And part of that was I want to go to Andoria. I want to go to Teller Prime. I want to go to, you know, everywhere else. And so then it was like, and then they would bring the Andorians back, even on original series, and it was like, and Tellarites, anybody? Okay, well, there's one time he's in the background. It's really cheap, half-ass makeup. Okay, and then the movies, and then you know, and then oh, and now here's Enterprise has the. So you know, Manny finally got some Tellarite characters in the Enterprise there at the fourth season, but we never, and we got to Andor, and the Anar, which was a nice little character wrinkle, texture that you weren't expecting, the albino Andorians and all that, but we never got we orbited Teller Prime. We saw what color the planet was, but that's the closest we got. So
Okay.
if I did anything in the future hardcore for for Star Trek Continues or any fan thing, that's what I'd like to do. Right, sitting here right now. Who knows what I'll think a year from now? But right now, that's what I'd like to do.
Right.
But yeah,
Wondering.
yeah. And did you know Star Trek Continues just won the Geeky Award? This is the second year for the Geeky Awards, and they just won Best Fan Series.
Oh,
So I
great.
wanted to tell you that. And here in about a week or two, they Fairest of them All is an entry for the Burbank International Film Festival. So it's kind of local, but we're having a red carpet and a party and all that, and that'll be a nice, an honor if they get something from that. But I love all the Continues people, my Continues family. I'm still helping out. I look forward to being in the think tank and going and watching. I'll go and watch some shoots and do interviewing and help out wherever I can. Who knows? Who knows what'll happen down the road? But I appreciate the fact that Vic let me come and play, you know, come and play in the sandbox. And again, I support all the fan films, and there's some amazing things happening right now between Alec and Axanar, and finally getting the Yorktown finished with George Takei in it from the '80s. I mean, just the things that we're able to do with our laptop technology
Mm.
uh, is incredible. So, I all for anybody doing a fan film, and I'll do what I can to help them. And my homies back in Oklahoma City with the Ajax and Starbase Studios in the middle of the country. There's a Star Trek set in Oklahoma City here in the States, and the ones overseas in Germany, England, Scotland, everybody around the world that's doing something, and whether it's original series or not. So, fans want their Star Trek.
Mm. That's
And
right.
if it's not gonna come out of Hollywood, then they'll make it themselves, by God. So there you go.